Well, hello there. My name's Jonathan Doyle and I am really pleased that you've stopped by to check out this first video in a 2-video presentation from some live sessions that I recently had the privilege of delivering to the fantastic principals and presidents in the Archdiocese of St. Louis. It really was a wonderful visit. I had so much fun being there, meeting so many great Catholic educators and leaders that are doing a fantastic job in this crucial and precious work of Catholic education. So in this first video, I'm going to be talking about some of the big topics that we face, issues around vocation, mission, burnout, resilience, fatigue, all of those things that are so important for Catholic educators right now. In the second video, I'm going to be talking about some of the practical things that we can do to really allow ourselves not just to survive this Catholic education vocation, but to really flourish in it. So I hope you enjoyed this first video. I'll check back in with you at the end. But for now, God bless, enjoy this, and thanks for the work that you're doing each and every single day. Let me take you through what we're going to do. I always like to show people where we're going. I just wanted to offer you one very simple opening reflection. We have got so much to do. If you want to take notes, I've got so much. You're going to sense it in me. I'm going to be just like pushing to give you everything I've got. But at the top level, I've been invited here to talk about this possibility around encounter and joy. And it's that little abstract, isn't it? Joy. It's like, as Maureen pointed out, it's kind of hard to define sometimes. And what do if you're not naturally effusive with joy? Do you know, you meet some people and they're just so joyful, right? You're just straight from birth. They just like walk in a room and wow. What do you do if you're not like that? And there's a powerful philosophical maxim. If you're taking notes, it's just this. I learned this many years ago. You may have heard it. It's just, you cannot give what you do not possess. You cannot give what you do not possess. So as we talk today about joy, how do we get that joy to be able to give it? It's a really interesting question. If you don't feel that you're naturally that kind of person, how do you give what you don't possess? So that's going to tie into this idea of encounter, because I'm going to show you where we might want to go to increase that experience of joy. So here, my friends, is a map. I always like to show people a sense of what I'm about to do with them, so you're situated. First thing I want to do in just a moment is I want to share with you something that I genuinely believed God has asked me to tell you. I've been praying for you for weeks, seriously. I have been praying for you for weeks, and often I ask the Lord to give me something that He wants you to know. So I'm going to share that with you in just a moment. Then we're going to talk about this question, where did my joy go? Because some of you here are just, you wake up every day still and you're pumped. You can't wait to get in there. Some of you are struggling and you can't tell anyone. What do you do when your joy is missing? And what are some of the things that are stealing your joy in this vocation? Because they are not going away. They may even intensify. In fact, I think they will intensify. And you're going to prove it to me in just a moment, I think. So where does our joy go? What causes it to go? And then I'm going to spend the bulk of our time about what can we do. I've got to give you something to do. I'm going to do 2 things. I'll give you a theoretical level to think about what you might want to do. I'll show it to you. I cannot make you do it, but you will not leave here thinking, I'm not sure what his thesis was. I'm going to show you the theoretical level, and then I'm going to show you the practical level. I'm going to show you real things to do in the real world that if you do them, are really going to help you to experience this encounter and to radiate joy. So let me tell you first what I think the Lord wanted me to share with you. God bless the Gideons. I've been stealing these all over the world. No, put them on eBay. No, I don't. But I didn't travel with a lot of luggage, so I was blessed to find that the Gideons are still doing great work in hotels around the world. So I said, Lord, come on, give me something for these guys that you would really like them to know. And here it is. You wicked and... No, it's not that one. Sorry, no. Get that wrong every time. It's awkward. Sorry. We're in John chapter 10, and we're in verse 7. I'd love you to listen to this. It says, anybody started doing this recently? Like, you start doing this? I didn't do that for a long time, and now I'm like, all right, here we go. John 10, chapter 7. So Jesus again said to them, truly, truly I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who come before me, or who came before me, are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and to kill and to destroy. But I have come that you would have life and have it to the full. And when you hear me say that, you're hearing John 10:10. I'm not so focused on John 10:10. This is what I'm focused on. This idea of being the door to the sheep. Because the sense that I had for you, that what the Lord wants you to know is that you are participating with Him in protecting the flock. Have you ever thought of that yourself that way? Have you ever thought you have been entrusted with a flock? It looks like a school. It looks like young people and colleagues, and it's a flock. And this scripture, I believe, is to remind you that the Lord very much sees you as participating in guarding and protecting that flock. So let me give this some magisterial backing. This is from the Holy Father in Evangelii Gaudium. Just listen to these words. He says, "Today more than ever, we need men and women who, on the basis of their experience of accompanying others, are familiar with processes which call for prudence, understanding, patience, and docility to the Spirit." Why? Why? Listen. He says, so that they can protect the sheep from wolves who would scatter the flock. So I want to position you at the start of our time together as participating in that ministry of protecting the flock at a time when I think culturally it may need a lot of protection from good people. So this map that I shared with you, let us try and situate ourselves on this personally. And to do that, let's do some live, empirical audience research. We're going to do this together, live, real time, high end, not quite peer reviewed, but good stuff. I'm going to ask you 2 questions. When I ask you the questions, all I want you to do is show of hands. All you have to do. And then we're going to work the data, we're going to run it through an algorithm, and we're going to come up with a conclusion together. First question. How many of you in this room believe that over the next decade, the expectations and pressures from government, from parents, from the wider culture, and the pressures of technology are going to decrease? Less government pressure, less parental pressure, less cultural pressure, less technological pressure. It's going to decrease. Who agrees? Show of hands in 3, 2, 1. Well, I failed math in high school, but I'm going to take a shot at the numbers here. I think it's 0. Second question. How many of you in this room believe that over the next decade, the pastoral issues facing young people, mental health, body image, family dysfunction and breakdown, social media addiction, how many of you think those issues are going to decrease? Show of hands in 3, 2, 1. Well, I failed maths, as you know, but I think the answer is 0. So you see where this is going, right? Like, things are not going to get easier in the short term. And this research leads to something that I simply have been calling for many years the simple equation. It's a very simple equation that I want you to think about, because this may explain where some of the joy's been going. And it's simply this. I'll put it on the screen for you. Let you sit with it for just a second. And I would imagine that many of you intuitively go, that's pretty close. You see, my friends, you cannot manufacture more time. You can tinker at the edges of effectiveness and get a little more efficient and effective, but it is not exponential. You can't become massively, radically more efficient and effective. So what do we do when we get more complexity, more demand, but our resources are relatively finite? Well, I've been saying for years, it's like a rubber band. You just stretch that, and you stretch that, and you stretch that. And some people break, or some people just get really tired. In my country, pretty much people just wind up cynical and exhausted. Mixed with that, everyone's at this point going, when we doing joy? Where did the joy go? The joy's coming back. We just want to understand what's pressuring it. The other thing is just the complexity. What I'm observing around the world, particularly in my country, is that schools are being asked to do more and more and more and more. Be counsellors, be therapists, be coaches, be this, be that. A lot of complexity. And schools were not really established originally to do that. Remember, there were no high schools pretty much anywhere in the world before the very early 20th century. Most young people did elementary education so they could go back and work on family farms. It was changes in agricultural technology and the growth of cities in the US that led to a rising clerical class, which meant more people needed to be educated to a higher level. But then the complexity keeps coming, right? So what do you do under these circumstances? Well, do you have this saying in Australia, like people say, how you going? You go, like I'm a duck on the water, mate. You ever heard that? A duck on the, you know what that is? Like the duck looks serene, but if you see the underwater view, the legs are like this, the little feet are just doing this. So sometimes I wonder if as principals and leaders, it's like, look serene, look calm, look like the building's not on fire, we're good. Because you're leading, right? And you don't want everybody to know that maybe you're tired and maybe you're finding it hard. So it's the illusion of serenity while underneath, and you may be really good at it, but then of course it can affect our own families, our own physical health, our spiritual health. So the question is simply this: is the trajectory of the educational vocation meant to look this way? Does God, do you believe in a God that goes, hey, I've got this incredible vocation for you, I'm going to call you into it, it's going to be amazing, and it's all on you? Because that would explain why people go, and then just... Now again, I want to be honest here because there's different people in the room. Some of you are like, no, I still feel the same way I did. But that's not everyone. And if that is you, you can listen for your staff because you're going to have staff struggling with this. So the question is this the necessary trajectory? Does it have to look like this? Do people have to get tired? Do people have to get exhausted and cynical or burned out? Does it have to be that way? I think it doesn't, simply because I always like to say, and to remind you, that every single educator had one of these. And it's called a first day. Can you think back to that first day? You probably got up pretty early, you made yourself look great, you got to the school early, you strode into that, I don't know what you call me, faculty staff room, a common room. You walked in and you're like, I have come. Take me to the children. And some of the older staff are like, we've seen this before. So what happens to that? What happens to that? Do you believe in a God that would take you there and then allow you to just lose that joy? Why would he do that? So, trust me, the joy's coming. We're through the hard stuff. Of our culture, all of the difficult global, national, personal issues, it can look like it's just a massive task, right? Well, what do we do? How do we get our joy back? How do we lead a school in these circumstances? So I want to give you two things. I'm deeply convinced, and more each day, that what's about to happen is Catholic schools are going to become once again very missionary. We're going to go back into the culture. It's a beautiful quote from one of the church documents in education that talks about the duty to go towards young men and women, to go towards them. So our posture doesn't ever need to be one of exhaustion, and it needs to be one of going forward, going forward. We're going toward them, we're going back out. But I've got some really good news about how we're going to do it. Key point. You do not need to be overwhelmed. Why? Because all anybody in this room needs to do is one thing. Your part. You just have to do your part where you are. That's got to give you some peace, because you're not responsible for everything. You've been placed somewhere. You just need to do your part. And the cool thing also is that Jesus has made a couple of very specific promises to you. You may have forgotten them, but I would like to remind you of at least 2 promises that he made to you. He promised that he would not leave you, us, as orphans. He promised he would not leave us as orphans. So one of the big things I'll be selling is it doesn't all depend on us. And the second thing is he tells us very clearly at the Ascension that he is with us always to the end of the age. It doesn't all depend on you. And that's good news. So here's what I think is happening. I'm going to press through now with some content. We're going to have a stretch break. We will lock the doors, but we'll have a stretch break. Because there's no way I'm going to talk for this long. So just stay with me and I'll push through the content. We're going to have a quick stretch break and then I'm going to do the practical stuff. Okay, here's what I think's happening. I think, my opinion, it's all it is that when you're faced with the complexity, the demands, the challenges of ministry, leading a school, leading people, serving families, people tend to take one of 2 paths. I think most people take one. And this is what I'm trying to really start to say to people. Most people, I think, are taking one specific path. And I'm here today to try and disabuse you of that notion. What most principles tend to do is make what I would say is a suboptimal strategic response. A suboptimal strategic response is that they look at the complexity, they look at the demands, and they make a response that's very understandable. So I'm no one's judge. It's incredibly understandable that many of us would gravitate to the responses that I'm going to show you. But there is another way. And I'm going to show you that way today, and I hope it is transformative for you. So what should we do? First thing is I'm going to give you a lens as I lead you into considering what we do. I'm going to give you 3 words. We'll revisit them again at the end, but they're very simple if you're taking notes. State, story, strategy. State, story, strategy. When humans are faced with strategic or pastoral or ministry problems, there are 3 things in play. You may not have thought about them before, but there's 3. State, story, and strategy. State is your physiological state. Whether you're awake, alert, well-fed, happy, energetic, feeling fit, or not. Contrast, how do you feel at about 4 p.m. on Thanksgiving Day? You're just like, there's something inside you going, 2 words. Never again. Never again. Now, if I come to you at that moment at 4 p.m. and say, I've got this great idea, you're like, tomorrow, man, tomorrow. So your state affects you. And then the next thing is the story. What's the story? The story that you think you are living, my friends. The story that you think you're in. What do I mean? The narrative architecture you have for what it is that you're doing. Are you just doing a job, or are you in a dramatic story of, in Latin, particeps creatoris, co-creating, partnering with God as his vice-regent on the planet in the redemptive service of young people? That's a different story. So what story you think you're in is very important. And your state informs your story, and then your story should inform your strategy. That is not what almost everyone does. Almost everybody in administration or business or life starts at strategy. You get a problem. Well, there's not enough joy in my school. People aren't encountering Christ. Enrollments are a problem. This is happening. Staff are fighting. What do? Everyone goes to strategy. And the best people that I've studied have said you don't start with strategy. You start with state, but I'm not talking about that much today. We're going to be talking about story. I want to put you in a story, and I want to show you what you might have been doing. And I can show it to you because I did it for 40 years. So I got some cred here. I'm not going to talk to you about anything I haven't lived. So that's our lens. Story. State, story, strategy. We're going to talk about story. What story? I'm going to give you one big idea, because no matter how good the speaker is or is not, we only ever usually remember one or two things, right? And one way to think about this is one of my favourite speakers once said, you don't need a whole bunch of great ideas to change your life or your school. You just need one good idea that you're actually prepared to use. I could show you 500, I've got a master's in leadership, right? I could show you 1,000 strategies. It doesn't matter if they're the greatest administrative, pedagogical strategies in the world if you don't use them. So I'm going to show you one big idea that I hope you'll use. And I've framed it like this. I want to show you something that I hope you'll start to avoid. And then I'm going to show you something that you can put in its place. I can't make you do it, but I want to show it to you, because I think this is the power that leads to encounter, which leads to joy. That's the architecture here. So here it is. When faced with difficulty, joylessness, complexity, exhaustion or burnout, what do most humans tend to do is something like this. For many of us, our default is to work harder, to try harder, to push harder. For some of us, it's all we've ever known. The only challenge with it, in the context of today, is it may be a heresy. Because when I was at the Pontifical Institute, they flew in this world-famous lecturer to do a week-long symposium on heresy. I have an interesting life. I get to just listen to interesting stuff. So we did a week on heresy. And just a little Catholic trivia, I just think it's fun. There's different kinds of heretics, right? You can be a material heretic. What does that mean? Well, it just means you're kind of involved with the heresy, but you don't really know. You're kind of involved with the material, but no one's ever told you, so it's your material. You could be a formal heretic. What does that mean? Well, you know something's a heresy, but you do it anyway. But then you can upgrade to another level and be an heresiarch, which means you invent your own heresies. And you're thinking, what's this got to do with us? A lot. Here it is. When I did the study, they introduced us to one of the great heresies that I think infects so much of our world and our ministry. And it comes from a guy, an heresiarch, whose name was Morgan, which is not a very good name for an heresiarch, right? You want something a little more diabolical. So he ended up with a different name. His monkish name, he was a monk, was, you may have heard of this one, Pelagius. And see, Pelagius very simply had this idea. He looked at the cross, he looked at Calvary, and he came up with this idea. And it was subtle, but it was really not helpful. It was just this. He looked at the cross and he thought, when Christ died there, he did everything that we could ever need to live perfectly. And then he thought, if you're not living perfectly, then you need to try harder. Now think for a moment about what that could lead to. Whatever's happening in your life, if it's not what you want, if it's not good, it's because you're not trying hard enough. God's done it all. You just got to appropriate it and do it. And so that was eventually refuted. And John Paul II talked about it. And Benedict talked about it. I'm going to give you some quotes for them later. But do you see where I'm going? That under pressure, under complexity, many good people of faith can often drift into, well, I just need to push harder here. I need to try more. I need to do more. Now, I'm going to do this so carefully because I don't want you to hear the wrong thing. If you're sitting there thinking, so what are you saying, Jonathan? Are you saying that we just bliss out and just sit back and everything's just going to work? Not quite. But I want to show you what it looks like in practice. Because I'm going to suggest something to you that if you do it, it changes everything. But to do it, you're going to have to stop doing something else. So, the way I learned this in person was I spent many, many years as a speaker, but I had one problem. You see, my background was a background of major trauma, major abuse, family-based trauma, sexual abuse. And by the age of about 15, I was sleeping in parks and ended up in a Salvation Army home. So as my life moves forward, I start speaking and I do reasonably well at it, but I was also struggling with panic anxiety disorder, PTSD, seasons of depression, but just massive healings taken place. But I would be on stage time after time, year after year, with a death grip. No one ever knew, right? Like literally no one knew. I would just get up on stage, and what I had to do, it's like a lot of things. I needed to get the subtlety of it, because I did care about people, and I did care about my faith, and I did want to support people. So there were good motives in there, but I was constantly just death grip. Do it right. Everyone has to like what you say. You can't lose anyone in the room. Never get it wrong. Always deliver. And it just wrecked me. I was just constantly like, no one knew. I was still kicking goals everywhere. So one year I end up in a diocese with a bishop who used to be my spiritual director. It's Carmelite. Phenomenal spiritual director. So I'm on this speaking tour and he's sitting in the front row, and this is like a homecoming for me, right? This is like this incredible moment where someone who knows me really well, has been part of my spiritual journey, is going to see me unleash hundreds of teachers in the room. Again, my motives were pure. I did care. I did want to do a good job. I do the presentation. I come off the stage. I head to the back of the room, and I notice that he stands up and he follows me out. It's a room very much like this. I'm at the back of the room. The next session's going on. He comes up to me, and he's this kind of guy. He didn't say much, but he just said this. He said, "Jonathan, you need to stop talking." And I'm like, "Excuse me? Did you see that? Did you see what I did up there? Like, did you see that?" And then he said something very important. He said, "I can see that what you are doing is drawing on something in you that is not good for you." And I've been found out. He's the only person that did it. Why am I telling you this? Because I'm somebody who had really good motives, trying to serve the Lord, but I was doing it from a place that made a lot of sense, but was coming at a pretty high cost. So what I want to do is show you the exact moment it changed. The exact moment. I'm going to show you a picture of the literal moment the healing took place. So was anybody here in 2017 when I spoke at NCA? Anybody in the room? Okay, you didn't know it at the time, but you saw it in real time. So this photograph was taken about 20 seconds after I walked on stage at the NCA convention. And what you're seeing in that moment is a radical thing happening. And what was it? Well, just before I went on stage, Karen's sitting next to me, and the president of the NCA is about to introduce me, and Karen said to me, "Are you nervous?" And I stopped and I said, "You know, kind of for the first time, I'm not." I said, "Why do you ask?" And she said, "I'm terrified for you." I said, "Why?" And she said, "Well, you could go up there and have another panic attack and freeze in front of everybody and just be ruined." I go, "This is not helping. This is not helping. Bible says you're meant to be my helpmate." No. But she'd seen it. She'd seen me walk on stages sometimes and go, with a PTSD, full-blown PTSD on stage. Now, you can do that in a regional town in Australia with 10 people in the audience, but when you've got close to 10,000 people in the room, it's a little more problematic. And then she says to me, "Why aren't you nervous?" And I said to her, I said, "Darling, if God has brought me this far, to put me on this stage and to publicly embarrass me in front of all these people and end my career," I said, "well, there's not much I can do at this point." And right at that moment, I was kind of caught in these two worlds. I was excited and pumped to be there, but I was, for the first time ever, kind of emotionally and spiritually empty. So as I walk up on that stage, for the first time ever, I had nothing left. I had no grand strategy. I just had nothing left. I was just like, this is it. And right at that moment, something really important happened that I need you to understand. It was the first time I was empty. And he showed up in a way that I had never experienced. And what happened after that talk was I went off the stage, and over the next 2 days, hundreds of people came up to me and said, wow, it's such a great message. They said, you know, when you spoke, it reminded me of something my grandmother said to me when I was 7. I'm like, wow, that's interesting. I come over to another conversation, the person would say, wow, you know, when you did this, it was like something my dad said to me when I was here. And I suddenly clicked. I just went, it's just loaves and fishes. I was saying something, but it was being multiplied all over the place. Because I was out of the way. So for the first time, I let go of any Neo-Pelagianism, and I tried to be completely surrendered. Not because I was holy or pious or intelligent or brilliant, it's because I'd tried everything else. So can you see what I'm beginning to sell here? That what I'm beginning to construct for you is there is a place for all our human excellences. But if you want to, there is a whole nother dimension that's possible. But often what it seems that the Lord does is He puts us in situations that are beyond our current capacity. So what I'm going to suggest to you as a strategy of encounter that will lead to joy is this idea of taking the leap. So I don't know what's going on for you now as you sit here. I don't know how good I'm doing or whether I'm communicating clearly, but what I'm suggesting to you is a radical disposition of heart where you're just like, help, at a much deeper level. And I think when I suggest to people this radical abandonment to the provision and presence of God, what if being excellence all you've ever known? And there's a great place for excellence. Because all of us carry our baggage, right? We all do. It's hard. I only got there by suffering for years. So you can do that if you want, or you can stay where you are and you'll be fine, you'll still do good stuff, but I'm trying to introduce you to the idea of another level of functioning. And this is really important. I was afraid for many, many years that if I really abandoned myself to the providence of God, I would lose things, I would be less somehow. But I really want you to understand this simple idea that as we begin this discussion on encounter, if you follow where I'm going, I can promise you, whatever natural excellences you have, whatever gifts you have, He will only ever elevate them. You're only going to get more effective. You can trust Him. You can trust Him. And to do that, I want to give this some profound backing from some of the greatest men and women in church history. In case you just think, well, what's Jonathan doing here? Therapy? Like, what am I doing? I'm just going to show you what the greatest minds in the Catholic tradition have ever said. You may have heard of this guy. His name is St. Ignatius, little-known Catholic saint. He says this. Now, why is he interesting? Because he was a lot like me, right? He was like a go-getter. He was driven. He was competent. And then he got his kneecap shattered at the Battle of Pamplona and spent months in recovery. And during that time, a lot of things happened. And here's what he has to say to you today. He says this: few persons comprehend what God would effect in their souls if they gave themselves up entirely. Not partially, entirely, into His hands and allowed His grace to act within them. Many people who hardly live as Christians are far from realizing, listen, that they might become great saints if they allowed themselves to be molded by the grace of God and did not resist His beneficent influence. It's the simplest thing in the world, and it seems to be just about the hardest to do. What? Give up. Surrender. Allow God to elevate what's already there. More evidence. You may have heard of another little-known Catholic saint called Catherine of Siena. The best way I explain saints to people is just to say that they became fully what they already were. So when you see these quotes, I just have a question that I frame for people, which is just this. Approximately how much more of your life would you like to spend not fully being who you are or were created to be? Is a week enough? A year? 10 years? The rest of your life? Because I'm really at a place where I just want to be what He wants me to be. I can promise you, if I never speak again, if I'm off here today and I never speak again, I'm good. I just want to be what He wants me to be. And I'll give you a last couple of examples and we're about to break. John Henry Cardinal Newman is another great example of somebody who learned this path of surrender. It's what I call the path of dependence. The path of dependence. Let me just keep reiterating my main thesis. The principle that you were created to be, the president that you were created to be, is in direct proportion to your ability to fully surrender to the will and the presence of God in your life. That's it. That's all I got. I'll do some more, but let's do it another way. For me, again, the husband that I have been created to be is in direct proportion to my ability to surrender, my desire to surrender to the provision and presence of God in my life. The father that I've been, join the dots, whatever you want to say. So John Henry Newman is interesting because he was also somebody that suffered a lot, very connected Anglican, very influential family, knew a lot of people, many great Protestant friends. Of course, he became a Catholic. You may have heard this before, but I just want you to hear this, especially the end, because he's such a phenomenal intellect. I would say he's speaking to all of us here. He says this: God has created me, you, to do Him some definite service. Do you think it's accidental that you are where you are? Do you think a God that holds the laws of the cosmos in perfect operation for billions of years and the unspeakable complexity of it, but where you operate in your vocation is accidental? Was He busy? Was He like, is it like, you know, the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, the Trinity's there pulling levers, trying to keep the cosmos working, and what about this person? Should we put them as a president? I don't know, let's let them work it out on their own. No. Definite service. God has created me to do Him some definite service as a principal, as a president, as a priest, as an archbishop. He has committed some work to me which He has not committed to another. I have my mission. Now this next line I've always found very confronting. I have my mission, then he says this: I may never know it in this life, but I shall be told it in the next. I can't speak for you, but I don't want to get to heaven and be told, Jonathan, look, it's fine, you did okay, but I had all this other stuff for you. But you couldn't trust me enough for it to happen. I don't want to have that experience. I'm a link in a chain, a bond of connection between persons. He has not created me for naught. I shall do good. I shall do His work. I shall be an angel of peace, a preacher of truth in my own place, while not intending it if I do but keep His commandments. This gets really good. Listen carefully. Therefore, I will trust him. Whatever I am, I can never be thrown away. If I'm in sickness, my sickness may serve him. In perplexity, my perplexity may serve him. If I am in sorrow, my sorrow may serve him. He does nothing in vain. He knows what he is about. He may take away my friends, he may throw me among strangers, he may make me feel desolate, make my spirit sink, hide my future from me, but still he knows what he is about. He knows what he's doing. And if that's true, how can we not trust him? Because if we can't trust him, then it depends on us. And I don't know what you see on your television screens, but we're not doing a great job globally. Almost done. John 15:5. Just going to give this scriptural backing, right? So what's my thesis? We're looking for a deeper level of surrender, which will deepen our encounter, which will eventually lead to joy. John 15:5, Jesus says these words, speaking to you, apart from me, you will be moderately successful. But he didn't say that. Apart from me, you will be an adequate principal or president and discharge your duties with some degree of effectiveness. But he didn't say that. So many of you would know that in John 15:5, apart from me, you can do nothing. That's curious, right? Because I would look at that and go, what about non-Christians? They don't do nothing. They do some good stuff. All I can think is that it means nothing of eternal significance, perhaps, or nothing of what he really has planned for us to do. I don't want to take the risk. I just want what he wants. It took me 40 years. I'm trying to save us all time. I just want what he wants. Because I've experienced that if you just want what he wants, things work out. A few years ago I spoke in Boise, and just before I went on stage, they brought the bishop up and he said something I never forgot. One sentence. He's speaking to all the teachers. He stood at the lectern and he said, you Catholic teachers, you've got to stop trying to make Jesus unemployed. Never forgot it. This isn't complex. We're just going to rediscover the essential dynamic we're being called into. So friends, would it be helpful for you, now what we want to do is the how, right? Hopefully I've explained why it matters, why you might want to consider it, and then we're going to talk about how we're going to do it. Would it be helpful for you to have a couple of minutes break now? Yeah. All right. So maybe have a stretch. Hi again, Jonathan with you. I really hoped you enjoyed that first video. There's a lot of, I guess, pretty powerful ideas in there about learning to trust, learning to take the leap. So I hope you'll now go across to the second video. Hopefully we put a link here underneath this first video so you can jump across to the second one, where we're going to talk more about the practical things that we can do, the kind of daily practices, habits, attitudes and ideas that can make a profound difference to us in Catholic education. So jump over to video 2. I'll see you there.